welcome to this class. For today, we're going to be discussing on the other concept on complex number known as the multiplication of complex number. In our last class, we discussed the addition and subtraction of complex number. So if you missed our last class on addition and subtraction of complex number, kindly check the description of this video to check out for the link below. So kindly watch the addition and subtraction of complex number by checking the description of the video. But for today, we're going to be discussing about the multiplication of a complex number. How do you multiply a complex number? So first things first, note the following. Number one, note that we said I is equal to square root of minus 1. So I squared will be equal to the square root of what? Minus 1 all squared. Of course, square cancels out square root. My value here becomes minus 1. So note that whenever you see I squared, the value for I squared is what? Minus 1. Note that I cubed is equal to I squared times I, right? So I squared times I gives I cubed. Of course, I squared, what's the value for I squared? The value for I squared is obviously what? Minus 1. Minus 1 times this is what? I. Of course, minus 1 times I becomes minus I. So of course, the value for I cubed becomes minus I. Yes, minus I. Finally, if I have I to the power 4, this can be written as I squared times I squared. Of course, the value for I squared is what? Minus 1 times I squared here becomes minus 1. Final answer becomes 1. So whenever you see I to the power 4, that is what? 1. I cubed becomes minus I squared becomes minus I becomes square root of a negative 1. So having understood the concept, let's take a quick example on how to solve problem using the concept of multiplication of complex number. Example 1. Let's say I'm given that z is equal to 2 plus 3i. Find z squared. I'm given that z is equal to 2 plus 3i. Find this squared. What do you do here? Of course, z squared is equal to 2 plus 3i all squared, right? So it simply means this man here is multiplying itself twice. So I have 2 plus 3i multiplying 2 plus 3i. First is first, we said whenever you want to expand something of this nature, what will your first task? Your first task is to pick out the first term here. So the value for this square becomes, pick out the first term here, which is 2, multiplied by all the term in the other bracket. I'll have 2 plus 3i. Next up, the second term is what? Plus 3i. Multiplied by all the term here, that's 2 plus 3i. Of course, if I expand this man, my value for this square will be equal to 2 times 2 becomes 4, plus 3 times 3 becomes 6i. Next up, plus 3i times 2, that's what? 6i. Plus 3 times 3 becomes 9. I times I becomes I squared. Of course, I can add these two maths together here. So this squared value will be equal to 4 plus 12i. Next up, plus 9 into what's I squared? We just said I squared here is what? Minus 1. So I'll insert minus 1 here. So from here, this squared will be equal in value to 4 plus 12i. Next up, plus times 1 becomes minus 9. At this point, take the remaining parts together and the imaginary parts together. So this squared becomes, the real part becomes 4 and 9. So 4 minus 9. Next up, plus 12i. Finally, the value for this squared will be equal to 4 minus 9 becomes what there? Minus 5. Next up, plus 12i. This is like how to solve problem under the multiplication of a complex number. let's take example 2 under this to understand the concept of complex number. Example 2. Given 3 complex number z1 to be equal to 2 plus I and z2 to be equal to 1 plus 3I and then z3 to be equal to 1 plus 2I, right? So find z1 times z2 times z3. So I'm going to find z1 times z2 times z3. What do you do first? Your first task says obviously what? Pick out 2. I'll pick out z1 and z2 first. I'll multiply it together. The value I'll have multiplied by z3, then I'm done. So first here, solution. Obviously, my first task here is what? Look for z1 and z2. So z1, from here now, I'll pick out z1 and z2 first. So z1 times z2 will be equal to, first check. What's of z1? z1 is 2 plus I. So I'll have 2 plus I. Next up, z2 is what? 1 plus 3I. Right here. Next up, expand this man here. I'll have, pick out the first term. We said z1 times z2 will be equal to, the first term here is 2, all into 1 plus 3I. Next up, I'm seeing I plus I is the next term in the first bracket. Multiplied by all the term here, 1 plus 3I. Right here. So my next task now is that the value for z1 times z2 will be equal to 2 times 1 becomes 2 plus 2 times 3 becomes 6I. Next up, plus 2 times 1 becomes 2 plus 2 times 3 becomes 6I plus I times 1 becomes I. Next up, plus I times 3I becomes 3I squared. From here, 6I times plus I becomes 7I. So the value for z1 times z2 will be equal to 2 plus 7I. Next up, plus 3 into, what's I squared? You just said I squared is minus 1 minus 1. Of course, z1 times z2 will be equal to 2 plus 7I. Next up, plus another becomes minus 3. At this point, I will take the real parts together and the imaginary parts together. So from here, the value for z1 times z2 will be equal to, this is 2 minus 3, that's what the minus 1 plus what the 7I as my value for z1 times z2. So now let's find the final answer. Let's find z1 times z2 times z3. Of course, z1 times z2 is what? Minus 1 plus 7I. Next up, z3 is what? Into 1 plus 2I. So the value for z1 times z2 times z3 will become, pick out the first term, minus 1 into 1 plus 2I. And here, second term is what? Plus 7I into 1 plus 2I. So final answer becomes, multiply this together, the value for z1 times z2 times z3 will be equal to 1 times minus 1 is what? Minus 1. Minus times 1 becomes minus. 1 times 2I becomes 2I. Next up, plus 7I times 1 becomes 7I. Next up, 7 times 2 is what then? 14I squared. Right here, 14I squared. So my value here becomes minus 1 minus 2 plus 7 becomes minus 4, becomes plus 4I, sorry, 5 perhaps, 5I. Next up, plus 14I squared. From here, minus 1 plus 5I plus 14 into I squared. What's I squared? I squared is what? Minus 1. I have a minus 1 here. So from there, minus 1 plus 5I, next up, minus 14. So my value becomes minus 1, next up, minus 14 plus 5I. By taking the real part together, minus 1, minus 14, next up, plus 5I. from here, minus what there? Minus 15 plus 5i. So the value for z1 times z2 times z3 is equal to what? Minus 1 plus, minus 15 perhaps. 15 plus 5i as my. Alright, let's discuss the division of the complex number. So how do you divide complex number? First things first, before you can divide a complex number, you need to note what we call the conjugate of a complex number. So before we discuss division of a complex number, you need to note what we call the conjugate of a complex number. By conjugate of a complex number, what do we mean? We mean that if I have, let's say I have z to be equal to 3 plus 3i. For instance, I have z to be equal to 3 plus 3i. What's the conjugate of z? Of course, the conjugate of z becomes z bar is equal to what? 3 minus 3i. So your task is that whenever I'm doing conjugate, you are changing the sign of the what? The imaginary part. The imaginary part means the number attached to I. So I'm only changing the sign here, which is attached to 3i. So the conjugate of the complex number is what? The change the sign of the imaginary part. So let's say I have, for instance, I have a to be equal to 4 plus 5i. Of course, the conjugate of a becomes a bar, which is what? 4 minus 5i. So this is like how to take conjugate of a complex number. Alright, let's now divide complex number. Example 1. If I have 2 plus 3i dividing let's say 3 minus 2i perhaps. Alright, how do you divide this? The text says that in mathematics you don't leave denominator as a complex number. So in other words, this question here, we need to rationalize, right? So in order to change this man to a whole number, it was rationalize, right? So because of solved. So if I rationalize this, so alright, let's rationalize this. So rationalizing, I will have that 2 plus 3i all over 3 minus 2i. So I multiply numerator and denominator by the conjugate of of denominator, right? So we said it's not proper for a complex number to have denominator as complex number. So in other case, you got to rationalize the numerator. You rationalize this by taking the conjugate of what? Denominator. So the conjugate of this becomes 3 plus 2i all over 3 plus 2i. Multiply this, I'll have that 2 plus 3i into 3 plus 2i all over 3 minus 2i. Next up, into 3 plus 2i. We said first task, take out 2 into everything here, 3 plus 2i. Next up, plus 3i into 3 plus 2i. All over, I have 3, this 3 first, into 3 plus 2i. Next up, minus 2i into 3 plus 2i. Right here. So at this point, expand numerator and denominator. I'll have 6, 2 times 2 becomes 6. Next up, plus 2 times 2 becomes 4i. Next up, plus 9i. Next up, plus 6i squared. 3i times 3 becomes 9i. 3i times 2i becomes 6i. So all over, alright, all over, I have 3 times 3 becomes 9 plus 3 times 2 becomes 6i. Next up, minus 6i. Next up, minus 4i squared. Minus 2i times 3 becomes minus 6i. minus 2i times plus 2i becomes minus 4i. At this point here, I'll have that 6 plus 13i because 4i plus 9i becomes 13i. Next up, plus 6 into minus 1. Of course, I squared is minus 1. So all over, I have 9. Of course, plus 6i, we cancel out minus 6i. And look at what? Minus 4i squared, of course, minus 1. Answer here, please. I'll have that 6 plus 3i minus 6. Of course, plus 6 times minus 1 becomes minus 6. All over 9 minus 4 times. Next up, minus 4 minus 1 becomes plus 4. Of course, arrange the numerator in terms of real part and what the imaginary part. I'll have 6 minus 6. Next up, plus 3i all over 13. My answer becomes plus minus 6 off. I have 3i over 13. Here is my answer after finding the division of this. Or perhaps you can write this as saying 3 over 13 are still correct. So here is a short problem involving division of a complex number.